protesters around the country to the 5-year anniversary of the tragedy at Mother Emanuel AME Church, I sit down exclusively with Ninth Circuit Solicitor Scarlett Wilson for this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Solicitor Scarlett Wilson, welcome officially to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I know obviously you are the ninth solicitor here. Describe Scarlett Wilson these days.
Well, busy and concerned. We are continuing to work hard through the coronavirus. I think we've got a good plan in place to keep business moving, to attend to cases, but to also keep people safe. So that's my main focus right now.
And you talk about those concerns. What other concerns do you have now?
Well, obviously, again, we have this virus looming. We have civil unrest, and those things weigh on me as they do the rest of the community. And certainly being so involved in the criminal justice system, I have concerns about where we've been and where we need to go. But we're working hard on that and have been for some time, and I think that this office is on the forefront of being the better part of change.
And I know obviously you cannot talk about what's going on here in Charleston as far as cases and whatnot, but where are we now with, obviously criminal justice reform and obviously racism in this town?
I think we're making progress. I was one of the people who pushed to get the CJCC, the
Right.
Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, up and rolling. And so we started working on issues of race in the criminal justice system locally.
Sure.
Before the Slager case, before the Mother Emanuel case. We were starting that process with some grant funding, because a lot of this kind of work involves data, and gathering data, collecting data, analyzing data costs money.
Yes.
And so around 2014 we began that process with other partners in law enforcement and elsewhere. And I think one of the things that I see that is heartening, one of the good things about what's going on in Charleston in our community, is that law enforcement has really been on board locally with making changes. And I have been impressed to see them as such an integral part of the reforms that we're starting here in Charleston.
And you talk about that data. What else are you looking at when it comes to race and criminal justice?
Well, we're looking to ensure that people are treated fairly across the board, from arrest to prosecution.
Sure.
And ensuring that decisions are made based on the merits of the case, the evidence involved, any aggravation or mitigation, and then that's done consistently and fairly across the board.
Let me turn to Mother Emanuel. That was the focus of this particular interview. Mm-hmm. Who is Scarlett Wilson 5 years later?
I think the impact of that time period on me remains to be seen. There certainly has been some.
Sure.
I have been, one of the things being a prosecutor that is sometimes difficult is that you meet such great, fine people in really bad circumstances. And so I've built relationships out of tragedy and out of heinous situations, certainly. But you always have that feeling that someone that you want to continue the relationship, you want to be friends with,
Sure.
You want to be a part of their life. You wonder if they think about the bad thing all the time.
Right.
And you just have to push through that, and I have. And I think that what happened at Mother Emanuel opened a lot of eyes. People who kind of skip through life thinking we're done with racism and thinking that it's over. I think that woke a lot of people up to realize it's not over, and the defendant in that case, who I don't like to speak of,
Right.
Was not just a person who didn't have a community to voice his opinions and his views in. There's a large community out there I think there are more good people, and I think there are more people who are appalled by those kinds of opinions and views and certainly actions. But I think a lot of people were surprised that there was a whole network out there. And I think being enlightened to that helps people act, particularly white people. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're seeing so many white people involved in the protests. And that's a good thing.
And you know, obviously we've had a couple of peaceful protesters here in Charleston besides what happened on Saturday night. What is your message to the protesters right now?
My message is I understand. I agree that we need reform and we need changes, and that's why I've been working on that for quite some time. I appreciate them being peaceful. I appreciate their resolve, because it's the same resolve that I have to make things better. And I think that they shouldn't stop until we see substantive change. I'm not going to stop until I see change. And they need to know that I and this office are with them. People who protest in earnest and in good faith, absolutely.
And when you think about Mother Emanuel 5 years later, where should the conversation go next, Scarlett?
Well, we have a couple of different issues, and they're intertwined, obviously. Like I said, we have the fact that there is a network of people who hold abhorrent views and opinions, and they need to be exposed. Certainly their First Amendment rights, but they need to be exposed, and they need to not be tolerated by good people and by the rest of us who are trying to do good things. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, that is somewhat related to the racism that we're still suffering from the hangover of many years past. And I think a lot of what we see in the system today is unconscious, institutional, and implicit bias and racism. And I think we've got to do our part to understand that, understand where it came from, how we got to where we are, and be committed to make a change. And we have to do that through thorough, steady, thoughtful analysis, not just taking anecdotes. You can't just take a situation that happened here and a situation that happened there a year later or whatever. You have to look at patterns. You have to look at the results. You have to look. The hard part for us is looking and measuring what kind of, again, aggravation, mitigation, and what kind of evidence you have, because a lot of decisions we make are decisions that, you know, we wish that we could do more or do something in certain cases where we don't have the proof. And so that can affect our decisions. But with enough volume, with enough cases, with enough data, you can still ferret out. They're going to be outliers, but you can ferret out patterns, and you can, we in prosecution can train and set up chains of authority and approval so that decisions are monitored for consistency. And those are the things, some of the things that we're working on here. We also can send a clear message to law enforcement that you know, unnecessary force is unacceptable, that dishonesty and acting without integrity is unacceptable. One of the things that I've pushed for in the past few years, before even this, was an excessive force bill. And I think it's important. Certainly a hate crimes bill is important for the community, particularly African Americans, and I understand that. I am looking for tools to hold people accountable. Most hate crimes have a companion crime that can go along with it, and we can see that justice is done regardless if it's actually labeled a hate crime. But I understand the importance, and I support that. We don't have an excessive force bill. We don't have an excessive force statute for law enforcement. And because of the power and authority given to law enforcement, because we expect law enforcement to go towards danger, and we understand that they're going to be involved in altercations. It is a part of what they do. The applying the rules that apply to you and me doesn't always fit and doesn't fit neatly. Excessive force can hold officers accountable, and there aren't many of them, but there are some, as we've seen, can hold people accountable for going too far, for going against their training, for acting unreasonably. There's a difference in acting unreasonably and acting with malice. Malice can be a difficult thing to prove because most people believe, and in many times it's true, an officer doesn't get up that day and have a malicious thought about the person he's going to be interacting with. And the law can be very confusing. It can be very convoluted, and an excessive force statute would make things clearer, and it would set expectations for law enforcement. And I think that would be helpful to them as well. I mean, they need to understand what the ground rules are, and the public needs to have protections so that it isn't a maze to get a jury to understand what was reasonable, what was unreasonable, you know, what the person was thinking or not. One of the hardest things to do in law is to prove what was in somebody's mind, what was in somebody's heart. The easy part's proving what they did, right? Video can tell you what they did. We're often tasked with proving what they were thinking, what they were feeling while they were doing it. I don't believe in law enforcement that should be the case in all situations. I think we should be able to look and see, based on training, based on policy, based on the situation at hand, was that unreasonable? Was that necessary? And if we had those standards, I think more law enforcement officers would be held accountable, and I think law enforcement would pause before some of the actions that we're seeing.
Nice Solicitor Scarlett Wilson, thank you so much for your time, and again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you. Good to see you.
You too. I hope to do it again.